Good. I was going to say good morning, everybody, but it's 12:30, so good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're well. I hope you've all got a nice cup of tea or a cup of coffee for our chat today, which is on building a high-performance board. It's great to see so many of you registered here. So we're going to kick off because we've only got half an hour and lots to get through. So first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Julia Elliott Brown. I'm a leading business advisor and fundraising expert, working exclusively with high growth potential female founders. And I know that many of you know me already, those people who registered to the event, but I've been in the startup industry for over 25 years now as a serial entrepreneur, building, funding and scaling high growth businesses across lots of different sectors, including fashion tech, online publishing, B2B, SaaS, so lots of different things. And over the last 7 years, with my current business, Enter the Arena, which is a coaching and advisory firm, I've supported over 1,500 women on their journey to scale their startups, helping them with raising investment, developing as entrepreneurial leaders, and achieving great business growth. When it comes to boards, I've spent 16 years at board level, both in an executive and in a non-executive capacity. And over this time, I've learned quite a lot about how to build and manage a great performing board. I've also seen some very non-great performing boards in my time too. And I talk to female founders day in and day out, hearing all about their personal experiences with boards, what works, what doesn't work, what worries them, what excites them. And so I'm very, very passionate about this subject. And I am honoured to be joined today by Fiona Hathorn, who is the CEO of Women on Boards UK, which I've no doubt you have already heard of. Fiona knows everything there is to know about what makes a great board member and how to connect with them. And we are both super passionate about supporting high growth female founders, promoting diversity at board level and seeing great women succeed. So today we're going to cover 3 things. We've only got 30 minutes, so we're going to be quite tight on this. First of all, we're going to talk about why you need a great board for your high growth startup. Then we're going to look at the difference between advisory boards and formal boards and when to on how to find great board members. So let me hand this over to Fiona to introduce herself and tell you a bit more about her background and the work she does with women on board. So Fiona.
Well, thank you very much. My background's asset management. So I used to buy and sell shares and I was head of global equities for a number of years, specialising in the emerging markets. But I got involved in angel investment about 15 years ago. And at that time, Julia, I had no idea that female entrepreneurs found it difficult to raise capital. And I was horrified at the lack of really important tipping capital that goes to female entrepreneurs, given that there are lots of female entrepreneurs, 50% of businesses plus are set up by women, but they weren't getting that important tipping point capital. So I cannot thank you enough, Julia, for what you do, because now I am a female founder, because I founded Women on Boards just over 10 years ago to support people joining the boards, because boards are important. Charity boards, public sector boards, listed boards, they set the tone and the culture of the organisation. But of course, boards support founders, they support executives, and it's a lonely and tough job. I know I've got 15 employees, 30 guest presenters. I didn't set it up to run a business, but I am running a business. I've got clients and we've got members who want to join boards, and lots of our members are interested in startup boards, advisory boards, and they're particularly, because of our roots being women on boards, keen on supporting women. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Julia, and thank you.
Fantastic. I mean, I think being on the board of a startup is super exciting and definitely of interest to lots of great senior advisors out there. But let's look at this from the founder's perspective, which is really what we're here to talk about. Let's talk about the why in all of this. So why would you want to set up a board? Why is it really important as a founder, as a high growth founder, to be thinking about this? What kind of value can a board add to you?
Well, I think you've mentioned the word high growth. There's various types of business. You either want to be a friends and family small business, just pay lifestyle business, paying yourself a little bit of income and doing what you want to do. If that's what you want to do, fine. And you might want to take advice from people. But if you want to scale, you want to raise capital, you need to be the best of the best, and you don't know everything. And when you are running a business, and you know, I'm talking for somebody who has run a business, you are so in the micro detail. Sometimes you forget to put your head up and really understand the landscape of what's going on. And if you choose the right advisors, the right board members, they can just give you a bit of a hug and say, well, have you thought about this? And challenge you. You know, diverse teams perform better because they see things from different angles. And if you as a founder trying to grow and do everything, operations, raising money and all that is difficult. And I'm on the advisory board of an organisation called Hanks, which has got 2 female founders, and it's a condom company. Who would have thought? And they won't mind me saying, but I met these 2 founders and they were nearly in tears over a very cease and desist letter they got from a big competitor and all these things. And I was able to actually sit them down and say, give me a list of your current issues, and then I'll see who I can help you with, because actually other people have got the answers to those questions. And you're thinking it from first principles. So getting support will help you scale. Really important.
That kind of that's the key, isn't it? That objectivity, that experience, getting the sound of the weeds of issues that are going on. Really important things, isn't it?
Yeah, you're going in and out, Julia. I don't know whether I'm going out on sound, but I definitely got the sound, the question. Boards or organisations that are successful, they do 2 things: performance, strategy and stargazing, delivering the right products, having the right strategy. Also, part of performance is implementing that strategy. And as you scale, you need structures and processes to do that. The other side of companies doing really well is governance. And if you are, and governance is about filing your accounts. It's about abiding by the law, the Bribery Act, all of those things. And as an entrepreneur, all of those are quite difficult. And if you do a little skills audit of what support do I need, you can't necessarily afford somebody to be, I don't know, head of legal or head of HR, but you can actually, and we've just brought somebody in, one of our members, to advise us. We want to scale up with our HR policies and processes. So we asked one of our members to come in and give us a bit of advice. And she told us about this consultant and that consultant, and we were reinventing the wheel. So really important to get that support.
Can everybody hear me now? I think I might have accidentally pressed mute, which is a real rookie mistake, isn't it?
Much better. Yeah, really good quality. Thank you.
This issue of governance is interesting, isn't it? I mean, I often look at it as being about risk, because when you're growing a business, you've got this objective, which is to grow and build value, often for exit. And along the way, you've got to take risks. And managing that risk is about managing the downside risks, the things that can go wrong with your business. And then there's the upside risks. What are all these opportunities that you have in front of you? And how do you manage the risk about which opportunities you follow? And I think that is one of the key things that a great board can help you do, is to help you navigate those upside and downside risks to build long-term value. That's quite tough to do as a founder on your own, I think, when you're head down building a business.
It's really, we do quite a lot of podcasts, and many of our members, they're joining boards for the first time and they need to chair a committee, and they'll often chair the risk committee. Super podcasts I've done with Brian Foss on risk is an opportunity. And I love the fact that you mentioned the upside to opportunity. And again, you can be challenged. Lots of companies go into liquidation all of the time. Sometimes startup and founders, it's not the product, it's not the idea, it's the fact that they haven't covered those risks. They haven't got an HR policy in place. And managing people is really, really difficult. And in the startup, raising revenue, bringing capital, bringing in investors, all those connections, often you miss those fundamental things, and somebody to support you. And I think a guide on the side.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know is the other one that I say.
One of the other things, it's called noses in, fingers out.
Mm.
You're either looking for somebody to help you because actually you don't have enough staff and you want to do it. That's a question we'll come on to later. Are you going to pay for it? Because they will say they're going to do it and they might not do it if you don't pay them to do it. But fingers out. I can give advice. I can give guidance. You don't have to take it.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the difference between being on a board and an advisory board later. But taking time and getting the right person to support you makes a huge difference. I've just got a new chair for our organisation. He's been hugely helpful. And every now and again, he says to me things like, Fiona, stop trying to solve every problem. You don't need all the answers. Come to us, tell us what the problem is, and let us do some of the heavy lifting. And I've learned, and that's about trust and fit and all that sort of thing, which is one of the things that, Julia, you will be able to help with people enormously. We can help you find board members. You can advertise on our vacancy board, and we'll touch on that later.
Yeah. And also, of course, there's, if you get the right board in place, they can also help you with connections, with joining the dots, with, representing your business on a wider level. There's so much that a great board can do for you. And I think, I've got this kind of bee in my bonnet about helping great women understand that value, because I don't, if we shy away from it and just think we can do it on our own, we are probably going to struggle to get out of that stage from startup into scale up. And that's where we need more women in business. Right. So let's look at the next bit. And we've started to touch on this, but we hear about formal boards. We hear about advisory boards. What is the key difference between the two? What do founders need to know about that, Fiona?
Well, most founders will have set up a company, and therefore they're registered at Companies House or equivalent, depending on where they are. And so you understand all about that. And you're called a registered director. Now, you might only have one or two registered directors because you're the sort of founder yourself. That's one thing. If you set up a board where you want to have board members, non-executive directors, advising and supporting you, they're officially registered at Companies House. So bigger companies are usually made up of non-exec and executive. And certainly if you list on the stock market, and if any of these founders, you've got aspirations to be on the AIM, the alternative investment market, you need to start a board earlier to get prepared to list, to be used to a chair. And so that's different. Now, they are registered, and the minute you're registered, so, I've been a registered director on a charity, for example, on an investment trust. I am personally liable. I'm not running the business, but I'm personally liable for what happens in the organisation. So if anything goes wrong, they'll be tapping me on the shoulder as well as the founder and say, what did you do? What did you know? Now, people get scared by this, but the reality is businesses go bust all of the time. It's not that you've done anything wrong. Something's happened. That's okay. You're only there to make sure you're filing your accounts and abiding by the law. And you need to get the right directors that support you. So that's if you've got a formal board. And my duty would be to make sure the shareholders are happy, and I'd have different duties and responsibilities.
Yeah. So a lot of responsibility as a formal board member. A legal responsibility to make sure that the company is managing its business well, that it's taking decisions well, that it is looking after the interests of all the key stakeholders, which is not just investors or the founders, it's also the customers,
Yes.
It's also the employees, it's also the environment, And so actually that there's a heaviness to that in some ways, but there's a grown-upness about a formal board. And then you've got an advisory board, which is quite different, isn't it? Tell us a bit more about an advisory board. And then also, when might you think about an advisory board and when might you think about a formal board?
Yeah, so just to give you an example, Women on Boards is a private company. So I don't need to have independent directors. I could have an advisory board, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So why did I choose to have a chair and give them a vote? Because we have a constitution about who can do what and what's the executive responsibility and what the board needs to vote on. I did it because we're a membership organisation. I'm taking money from people to support them find boards, and I need to provide them a service. I need to think about succession planning. What happens if I die suddenly? What about the other founders? What's going to happen to the business? So I wanted a board that thinks about the long-term survivability and success of our company. So I chose to have a formal board. Prior to that, I had an advisory board. And so basically there were 4 or 5 people, and I did a skills audit. One was an advisor on tech, one was advisor on HR, and then there's the sort of advice that Julia gives, which is, you've got a wide network, tell me your problem, I'll see how I can solve it. There's a generalist advisory board, you've got specialist funding experience and all the others. So it depends what you want. Now, if you're on an advisory board, and I'm on several advisory boards, I'm not personally liable for anything. People come to me with a problem and say, Fiona might be able to help. So it's either in a board environment where the 6 of us are sitting around the table, it might just be a call. And then I can give them advice and they can take that advice or they can ignore that advice. Now, the only thing I would caution you against is, it sounds really nice to have an advisory board. Please don't waste time unless you actually want to use it, because it's a tick box exercise. So think about, do I want them to meet monthly? Is it individual advisors that I've created like advisory board that don't ever talk to each other? What's the purpose? What do you want to achieve? And I think, we can help as an organisation. You can advertise advisory board roles on our website for free. We don't charge for that. And the same with the board member. But actually working with an organisation, consulting with them, saying, what do you want? Where do you need to go? That Julia, you will have all of that knowledge. And we'll talk about widening the net native, but it's fundamentally different.
Yeah, and you need to think about it strategically, don't you? It is about kind of, what do you need to help you navigate the challenges, and that board actually can be quite fluid. You don't have to have the same board for the next 10 years. That's a board that can change, and advisory boards particularly can evolve over time.
Well, I would set most good boards have term limits. So your appointment is 3 years. And that means after 3 years, you can ask them to step down, or you can reappoint them. If you don't set term limits, you've actually got to say, sorry, will you go? Will you step down a bit first? And that's quite difficult from a founder's perspective. But I would do the same for advisory boards as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach. And actually, with an advisory board, I mean, it's never too early to set one up. And I think some of the best founder-led businesses that I've worked with set up an advisory board right from the get-go, because that level of skills and support you get can accelerate your growth so much faster. I think we are all sort of quite reticent as founders. We think, do I need those people? Can I just do this by myself? But actually, I think it's never too early if you can figure out how to structure it right, and also deal with the remuneration issue, which I'm hoping we're going to touch on at the end. So let's talk then about how you find great board members. So let's say you put together your strategy about what you want from a board, whether you want an advisory board or a more formal board. How are you going to find these board members? What are the strategies that we can follow, Fiona?
Well, what we can do, just on the last point, is top executives, whether in the startup world, they're curious. They like challenge. So that's one of the key things. In terms of finding them, you can either stay in your little bubble of the people you know, the people you went to school with, your parents, your cousins, and all that sort of stuff. Or you can do what I talk about, is turn off the spotlight of people you know and turn on the floodlight. Because curious people want challenge from different perspectives, different areas, different industries. They understand transferable knowledge, transferable support. So that's why we exist. Because our vacancy board, you can free to advertise. We've got 10,000 members. And not only do we have members who know they want to join an advisory board alongside their day job, or they want to be on building up a portfolio career. There's thousands of those. But in addition to that, we have corporate members. BlackRock. Actually, I was going to mention a big tech firm. I'm not allowed to mention who they are, but they're quite well known. And lots of senior executives working in the global environment. And they know that being on a board is good for them, the society, and also strategically for their career. So we've got lots of cross-sector. I don't know all of those members, and you think, I have to know them. But the beauty is, if you've done a skills audit, see who you get. You don't have to appoint them, but challenge yourself. So that's one thing we can do. And of course, Julia, I'm sure you've got a network and you know exactly who can solve that problem. 2 different approaches, equally valuable. Give it a go.
Yeah, I mean, networking is key. It's about building relationships. And I think the point you touched on there around diversity is really important, because what you want on a board, whether it's an informal or a formal board, is diversity in terms of skills and experience, but also in terms of opinions. So that, because what you don't want is a board who are all going to sit around and just agree with everything you say. The point is that you need to be challenged. And I think having that mix between maybe sector experts, technical experts, maybe a generalist, it's helpful, I think, if you've got somebody on your board who understands the entrepreneurial journey and what you're going through and can support you through that. And those people who are sort of ex-corporates who bring potentially some incredible contacts. There's such a breadth of ways of looking at this that you start, don't you, by mapping it out. And there's something that I love to do with clients, which is look at, what's your dream board? Like, if you could have these three, any three people on your board, who would they be? And actually think big, because why not? If you don't reach high, you're never going to get there. And with things like LinkedIn, I mean, actually, there's always a way that you can get in front of those people somehow and have a conversation, just to see if they resonate with your business, to see if there's some value they can add. You never know where it's going to go, right?
You never know where it's going to go. And if you're reaching out on LinkedIn or anything like that, connect. It's not like collecting business cards. Do a bit of research. Dream board. If I had my dream board, I would have Alison Rose. So I know it's a bit of a controversial figure because of the whole NatWest Coots thing going on at the moment. But if you learn anything about Alison Rose and her fantastic career and the way she put supportive female founders, she would be on my dream board.
Yeah,
but
she'd be on mine too.
What I was doing, one of the things I would want as a founder, and fit is right, but fit shouldn't be just people who are going to agree with me or who I know. So when you've got somebody you don't know, make sure the dynamics work. But I would have a chair, because when I first launched, I've been sat on loads of boards, advisory boards as a fund manager. My sweet spot's startup boards. I love them. But when I tried to manage my board meeting, there I am, the chief exec, reporting on the performance to the other investors. But they're challenging me, and then I'm trying to manage the meeting as well. You need a chair. Somebody who sets the agenda, has a conversation with them, sees the perspective, can sense the nuances. Found a bit tired, big investor meeting, a bit worried about cash at the moment. It's going right, we're changing products. Having a good chair, I think that is where I would start.
Yeah, very important. And a chair is not you. It's not you, the CEO, is it? It needs to be somebody independent. Yeah. And a great point you just made there about often boards. I see this a lot where people don't set up a formal board until they get their first big investor on, and then all of a sudden this board has kind of been decided on by two investors who each have a seat on the board, and you're there, the founder, with your co-founder, and it feels a bit kind of founder. It can feel a little bit founder versus investor. Sometimes you're a bit nervous about what you want to share with your investor because you want them to see the good things, and it's very important you create an environment of trust and openness. But that's where that kind of an independent chair brings so much value. I
mean, interestingly enough, we've got private equity, venture capital, are under a bit of pressure at the moment because they haven't got very diverse teams themselves, let alone in the companies they're investing in. And they have a pool of people, their friends, that they will put to represent them as an investor. And the dynamics is very them and us, exactly as you described. That they're being challenged on that at the moment, but they are really interesting dynamics. So you're absolutely right. If you get in there first and have a good chair, and your investor is comfortable with that chair and does that relationship for you, it's not then bounced on you. You're ready, you're professional, you're stepping up, which is why your point about what type of business right at the start. Are you a high growth? And if you've got aspirations there, you're more likely to get investment as well, because you're showing the type of founder and entrepreneur that you are, rather than
you're serious.
Drag you up because you don't quite get what scale really is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. We have got time actually to just touch very quickly on remuneration. This is a big one because everybody says, well, I'd love a board, but I can't afford a board. What do I do? And, I normally start with founders talking about, okay, well, what kind of budget could you potentially allocate to this? Whatever it is per month, whether it's, £500, £1,500, £2,500. And from there, you can then start to think about the number of people on your board, the frequency of meeting up, what you might need from them. And there are different ways to structure it, aren't they? It's not all about fees. It can also be about equity. Kind of what do you tend to see, Fiona, in terms of remuneration on high growth startup boards?
Well, high growth startup boards is absolutely a different question. Most people don't get paid anything for being on boards, charity boards, school governing boards, that type of thing. The minute you get into a business board, why should somebody give you time to scale up your business to make you a lot of money when they get nothing from it? So you've got to get the balance right. Lots of people will sit on, so I've sat on 2 startup boards where they've given me what's called sweat equity. So they've decided I'll be coming to 6 board meetings a year, what the day rate would be. They can't afford that day rate. And we're not talking huge amount of money. I mean, my first non-exec directors, I paid them £6,000 a year, which is not a huge amount of money for their time. It was about £500 a day for their time, less than that. And they did way more work than that. And I've changed that funding now. But sweat equity means that if they do scale, I've got a proportion, and that's part of it. Or you could say, actually, lots of people will do it for free because it's good for their CV, and lots of women often do things for free. Be careful. You clearly, it's nice to take that free, but if you want Julia's time and you want that quality, because if she's got a fee, she'll think, well, I haven't got time for that. I'll do that quickly. Do you want serious support? You're not talking consultancy, really expensive, some of these big names, but if you want it, often you should pay for it, because if it's valuable, you will pay for it. So I think you've got to structure, but there's many ways that you can structure this. But advisory boards, people will do it for free, but if you're going to do it, use their time, make sure they do it, and then reward them. You can reward people in many, many different ways, but you've got to get the risk and the reward structure right.
Yeah, and I think that's about understanding that individual and what it is that they need, because there is this danger that people put advisory boards together because it looks good on their investment pitch. Those advisors are someone that maybe you go for a coffee with every so often. That to me is not what I would call a really well structured and thought through board. You know, for me, a really good advisory board is one where you're meeting at least quarterly, with meetings that have got real meaning and purpose. You're also connecting in between, and there's value to that. So to pay a board advisor, let's say a starting place of £6,000 a year, the value that you'll get is going to be way more than that. And the equity piece is really important because it means that everybody is aligned with building long-term value in your business, which is what you want. That's where you want to go. So I think that having a blend of that, depending on that individual and what they need, is the way to go.
I mean, just to throw one bizarre thing in, you can do something called a shadow board. And a shadow board, again, you have to manage it, but they are given bits of your board pack and say, what would you do with that? Just for a laugh. So you have the main board going on, they're making their decisions, but a shadow board is a complete waste of time if you don't actually listen to what they're saying. Again, you don't have to do anything about it, but it's a challenge. Have a structure, know what you're doing and why, because if you can't explain that, it's probably not worth doing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, shadow boards, and that's where you can get kind of younger people from the community or your employees, or very different perspective. And I really like that idea.
Yeah, that's for another one of these.
But I mean, there's so much to know about boards, and obviously we've just touched on a few of the key things here today. But if anybody watching this would like some more information about, you know, setting up a board and how to go about it, or you would like some support and advice from me around actually getting that done, setting it up, then please reach out. And also, if you already have a board that's let's just say you have a board that's dysfunctional and you want to talk about that too, that's something I've done lots of work on. And of course, you know, check out Women on Boards, because it's a really great place to find superb non-exec directors and advisory members who could add real value to your business.
I just have one thing, and if you think about going on a board yourself, a community board, I know you think you haven't got time, but it might make you more effective entrepreneur. So we're happy to help you with that as well. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for attending. I know there's been loads of questions, and I'm not sure if we've been able to answer them all, because I can't multitask and look at questions as well as talk at the same time. But I will look at the questions afterwards, and I will personally connect with all of you to see if there's anything I can do to help. And you know where both of us are. I hope you've enjoyed the session, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. Bye.
Bye-bye.